This week, I was finally able to sit down with Amber Hinds from Equalize Digital to do a full demo of her plugin Accessibility Checker. Now, you're probably already familiar with Amber from the weekly series on the admin bar, Accessibility Weekly, but if not, Amber is an expert when it comes to website accessibility with clients as big as NASA. Now, I know you're probably looking at the length of this video and wondering if it's worth the investment, but even if you don't have time to sit down and watch this whole video right now, I would highly encourage you to find some time on your calendar to do it. Amber walks us through the best practices and the typical workflow for auditing websites for accessibility using her plugin. Not only will you learn how to use both the free and pro version of her plugin, there's all kinds of golden nuggets in here that are really going to enhance your workflow, including how to set up your starter site so you can save a ton of time in the long run. I hope you enjoy this video, and be sure to check the links down in the video description below where Amber's offered us a generous 20% off the pro version of her plugin. With that, let's go ahead and dive in. Fantastic to have you here today, Amber. I'm really excited about this. This has actually been a long time coming. I think we started talking about doing this like a year or more ago, and I've really kind of been a little hands off on your plugin because I really wanted to find out from you how to use it. So I'm very excited that today is here and we get to do that. But before we jump into the kind of activities we have planned for today, why don't you give everybody a little bit of background on who you are and what it is you do?
Yeah, so I'm Amber Hinds. I'm the CEO of a company called Equalize Digital. We're a certified B corporation that specializes in WordPress accessibility. We have a plugin called Equalize Digital Accessibility Checker that audits WordPress websites for accessibility problems. And I run the WordPress Accessibility Meetup and WordPress Accessibility Day conference. I'm one of the lead organizers.
And the author of all of our fantastic Accessibility Weekly posts on the admin
Yes.
bar. Can't forget that.
Yes, I've been having fun all year long writing a weekly post on accessibility for the admin bar, completely neglecting my own content on my own website.
Yeah, truth be told,
But
you know exactly how many weeks are left in this year because you've counted down how many more of those you have to write before the year's up.
yeah, and but I do appreciate you giving me the nudge to do it because I've been so bad about content creation for myself, but I feel like committing to doing it for
Mhm.
you made me okay, now I'm going to do it.
It's accountability.
And now I think I built enough of a habit that I'll be able to start blogging on my own website once a week because now I've forced myself to figure out how to fit that into my schedule.
There you go. See, I
Oh,
just
thank
did you a
you.
favor. That's all I was doing. It wasn't selfish at all, I promise. Well,
Yeah.
fantastic. Well, let's talk about what we're going to do today. Obviously, accessibility is a huge topic. There's many things to cover. We already spent 5 minutes before this call and got into like 10 different angles of it. But what I thought we'd do today is take a look at the Accessibility Checker plugin, how it works, how to use it. To give us kind of a demo to work off of, I set up a Generate Press starter site. So one of the pre-made kind of starter templates they have on a brand new install, just so Amber can have something completely fresh to go in and kind of audit and take a look at. And I think this is a really good exercise in, sometimes we use these templates to start out with to give us a head start. There are going to be things, I'm sure, within this starter template that we need to edit and tweak and fix and all those kinds of things. So hopefully this will give you a good idea on kind of the process to take to go through that. Obviously, you're also sometimes just picking up websites that other people built or your past self built before you knew more about accessibility stuff. So hopefully today's demo is going to show you a good idea of how to get in and start working with this plugin and start making some improvements to your sites. And just for clarification purposes, because I do think there is confusion sometimes between plugins that will overlay on your website and try to fix accessibility problems and what your plugin does. So before we jump into your plugin, why don't you kind of explain the difference there so there's not confusion?
Sure. So accessibility overlays or toolbars are things you frequently see on websites. They have what I call like the starfish guy icon, where it's like a person with his arms and legs out, or sometimes they'll have a wheelchair icon. And when you click on them, they open a toolbar that allows people to change the contrast or make the font size bigger. I don't know, any number of things, stop animations, all kinds of things. And then usually they also include JavaScript that is trying to, as the page loads, modify the page content. Sometimes they'll use image recognition to try and insert alt text onto images that don't have alt text, that sort of thing. Overlay tools are not recommended by people with disabilities very frequently they can add accessibility problems to websites. They also can do strange things. So the AI image things, for example, they don't always do a very good job naming images or providing the right alt text to describe what the image is and the purpose of the page, especially on e-commerce stores. They can do some really strange things that's not helpful, and it just adds noise. So our tool is a testing tool. It is not something that attempts to modify your website with JavaScript. It has zero speed impact on the front end of your website as well. You can imagine those JavaScript modifications, what that can do for performance. And it is a tool that you can use to learn more about accessibility and improve the websites that you're building, or potentially even creating better care plans that include accessibility remediation over time every month to increase your recurring revenue.
That's fantastic. And a quick anecdote on that. A long time ago, when I first started, I bought a tool off AppSumo called Website Auditor that just audits general SEO things and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I started using that on every site I built. I would run that tool and I would learn, hey, I need to get better about doing this or doing that. And over time, it really taught me how to do things using best practices, so that years after doing this, I realized when I'd run that tool, I'd have zero errors on it because I had trained myself to like not do those things incorrectly, which I think is a great idea here with your tool. Is after you keep running this on your site over and over, you're going to learn about the things that you seem to do wrong a lot, and the plugin's always catching you on doing. So that way in the future, you'll avoid doing it in the first place, which I think it's like a huge training aid as well. So that's really, really cool.
Yeah, we talk about it a lot, being in many ways, accessibility is similar to SEO. It's not a one and done. It's something that you have to build into your practice, but you do learn, when you first start writing blog posts, you don't frequently include any headings. It's just a title and a bunch of paragraphs. And then you start to realize your SEO plugin will flag you, hey, you need headings on this. And accessibility is the same way. Headings really benefit. And if you start using tools like Accessibility Checker, then over time, you're going to make fewer accessibility mistakes because it's going to catch them and remind you. And then you'll just naturally start doing those things.
Absolutely. All right. Well, why don't you share your screen and we'll dive into this install and see what kind of mess we can make of it. And I'm just going to interrupt you when I have questions and I don't understand things.
Well, this will be extra fun because I've never really used GeneratePress. So I'm coming at this super fresh. Like I got a login from Kyle about 2 minutes ago for this website. So you'll have to help a little bit on how would we fix some of these things,
okay, great.
And what's possible. And I do also have another site up that we could flip over to at some point if we wanted. That's like a Cadence demo site, just like one of these.
Sure.
So the first thing, just so everyone knows, this is the home page. Obviously, we've got, some sort of fake content in here, but just to give a feel for what the site is. So when we install Accessibility Checker, there's a free version. There's also a pro version. I have the pro version on here, but you can just start with the free version. I'll try and point out the differences along the way. The first thing in the settings is you'd want to check what post types are being checked. This site doesn't have any custom post types, but if you have custom post types like an event calendar or a podcast or a services post type or products, you'd want to make sure that you come here and turn that on. Then in the pro version, you can go over to full site scan and you can run a scan of the entire site. So if it's not a new site that you're building on, it's something that you're adding Accessibility Checker to, this would be what you would want to do in the pro version. Otherwise, in the free version, it'll scan every post or page as you go in and edit it. But this is a way to get a head start and have it go check all those without me having to go in and hit the update button.
Gotcha.
So I'm just going to run an accessibility check, and it should, I don't think this is password protected site, right? I didn't add the credentials for that. Should theoretically start checking it. We'll see. Yep, there we go. So it's going to run through. We don't have to stay here and watch it. It's going to go pretty quickly because there's only 21 things. But we'll flip back over, and one thing that I think is actually really helpful, there's two ways you can approach the reports. So we could go on the front end Actually, maybe there's 3 ways you can approach reports. But we go on the front end. This is only visible when you are logged in. And we could go through the accessibility checker reports on the front end of the website, and it will take us through different issues. Like right now, it's telling me this image has empty alternative text. Now, on a website that you build for a client, this is something that you would want to resolve. On a theme demo, you're like, I'm just going to replace that. And when I add real content, right? So that's one of the things you always have to think about when you're assessing a theme and whether or not you want to use it as a starting point. Some accessibility problems that exist in the theme demo aren't really going to exist once you start setting it up for your client. Like color contrast is one that I frequently ignore in a theme because I know I'm going to replace the colors for my client anyway. So who cares if the theme itself doesn't have good color contrast?
Right.
Assuming it can be changed. I mean, the one thing that I might look at on these, and it looks like they're all this way, is this a setting, and should it be pulling alt text? Like it might be pulling alt text out of the media library. If they're linked like this, I'm just going to open the inspector. So this is actually linked to the article, the post. And the question is does it actually make sense to have the alt text that would come off the image? And probably the answer is no. So we could check this, like, and I'm going to jump around a little bit, so feel free to
You're fine.
tell me, but this is just something that popped up.
Yeah, everybody watching this is very familiar with WordPress, so I don't think that'll be a problem.
Yeah. So where are we? Oh, Maldives. So if I just added alt text, I'm just going to call this a bridge. It's not great alt text, but we're not talking about writing alt text right now. Let me actually go back. So one thing I will say, where was that post? Hold on. The front end doesn't scan. So the front end view will get you through things, but if you need to rescan something, then you would need to update the poster page.
Okay.
I went into the post. But what I sort of am wondering, and I actually shouldn't have gone into the post, I should have gone into the homepage. So let's go back to the homepage. So I'm going to update it. It's going to force it to rescan. So if we view this page, and I'm just going to inspect this in the inspector without using accessibility checker for a second, because I'm curious about something. Yeah. So this is sort of an area where things might get a little dicey on if you're using a builder or not, because this is, I bet you, a grid. I didn't leave this page open, but a generate blocks grid.
Yeah.
So what it did was it put the alt text from the image, but that would mean that for a screen reader, this would read as link bridge. Which, because the bridge is what I put, right. I actually think that this is something I would flag for generate press, because they should probably actually put the alt text should be the title of the post where it's linking to.
So automatically it should be.
Yeah, these should fill in automatically. And they shouldn't really describe, in this case, they shouldn't, where they're on like an archive or a page linking over to them, they shouldn't describe the image. They should describe the purpose of the link. But a way that I might fix this, and you'll have to tell me if this is possible, can I remove the link from the image completely?
Yeah, so if you click on that image, this is like a loop, so it'll work no matter which one you click on. And then over on the right under dynamic data, link source, there's a drop down, and if you click that drop down and click just on the word select, that will unlink it. That would remove it. Yeah, and doing this would do it for all the images in this loop. Correct. Yeah, so if I was starting from this theme, that's probably a way that I would solve this problem. Yeah, and I mean, this is a common situation we see a lot where user experience wise, I think some people are going to click on the image to get to the post. Some people are going to click on the title to get to the post. Some people are going to click on that link at the bottom that says view article to get to the post. But that creates a situation where we have 3 links going to the same place right next to each other. So I know that's an issue too. So I run into situations like this all the time where I'm like, I wouldn't even known about the alt, like that alt text needed to describe the link and not the image. Like there's so many things to consider here. So I wonder where we even start with an issue like this.
Yeah, I mean, these kinds of issues I think are challenging because this is something that I would report back to the plugin developer. Can you patch it? Yes, but then you run the risk of it causing, other issues when there's a plugin update, your patch doesn't work. And then also when we're talking about patching stuff that comes from another plugin, what we're doing, and we do this sometimes, we write custom JavaScript in the child theme. And it's like an overlay, only it's an overlay specific for our website. But that sort of sets you up with some technical debt that every time you run updates, you have to make sure that still works. So this sort of thing, I would either just like report it and then ask them, because in an ideal world, this should be sort of, have you seen the card style where there's a link that goes around everything?
Sure.
I'd want to see one link that wraps the image and the text. And if you really need view article, I don't think you do. You could you could turn that off, but like one link would be most ideal.
So there
or
is
the other option is sometimes you say, I'm going to use a different plugin to do my post grid.
Right. So there is an option to do that to where you just link the whole card. In fact, there's 2 options in there to do that. I think just in this case, whoever set up this demo went about it this way. I think the hard part.
How do you do that? Is that on the block settings?
Yeah, so you might need to pop open the list view so we can see what exactly you have selected here. All right, so if you click on that post template, and then over in that dynamic data drop down over there, you can enable the dynamic data, and then scroll down for link source, and you'll change that to single post. And that will enable a little link in that little pop-up toolbar just above the post you have selected. Okay, if you click on that, it gives you 2 different options. So there's a hidden link, and there's kind of a description there that tells you about that. And if you drop down, there's also a link wrapper, I believe, is the other option. So there's 2 different options inside there on how to handle those links. Unfortunately, when you do the first option there, it does give you an area for ARIA text, but it doesn't let you bring in anything dynamic. And since it's a loop, you
so it wouldn't put the post
static
title
for all of them. Like
which would not be good. We don't want the same ARIA label. So an ARIA label, for people who aren't familiar, is it would override whatever's contained in the element. So yeah, we would want it to be the post title for each of them.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I know
so maybe does the wrapper work?
So I believe so. One problem we're gonna have to go in there. If you change that to wrapper, you're cool there, but you need to click on the title of one of those posts. And we need to go to that link source and turn the link off.
Where's the link source?
There you go, right there. Select, and then on that same thing on that button, the view article, we need to click that and get rid of the single post link there too. And now you can update it on the front end and see what it looks like as far as what I believe it will announce the title of that post, but I'm not 100% sure. Yeah,
so we can I'm just going to inspect it, and then for fun, I can turn voiceover on if you want.
Sure.
So a lot of accessibility checker will find a lot of problems for you, but I do a lot of this where I'm also just inspecting the code to sort of see what happens, and then I'll use a screen reader too, because there's some problems that an automated tool can't find.
Yeah.
But this looks like, so we've got a link, and it's probably going to read out the image and the title and view article. So let me
zoom up in system. Participants can now see your screen. You have started screen share. Zoom.
Okay. So I'm just going to go to one.
Zoom us. Test articles. Heading level 2, 2 items. Image. Latest articles. Image. Latest articles. Link. Heading level 3. Exploring the beaches in Brazil, September 19th, 2022 view article. Link, heading level 3. Amazing resorts to visit in Bali, August 28th, 2022. View article. Link, head.
So that actually, so it
Voiceover
read
off.
out the link, the heading, the date, and view article all in there. And I think that's great.
Okay.
So honestly, that would be a way that I would remediate that from the default. So obviously there's a great way to do it. I did notice when I was testing, it told me image for this little guy right here.
Yeah.
It's probably because it's an SVG and it doesn't have, it's like decorative. So it
Right.
needs ARIA hidden on it. And I don't know if you have any way to add custom HTML attributes.
Yeah, in the pro version of Generate Blocks, which is installed, we can add data attributes and ARIA labels and all that kind of stuff on it.
I would probably, if you're going to keep that, I probably wouldn't do it here.
Yeah.
I would maybe like insert an image. It could be the same thing, just in its own little image block above the heading.
Right.
And then you
even if you wanted to use that
ARIA
little
hidden on it.
Yeah, even if you wanted to use the little icon thing inside the headline, you could then have it as its own headline and hide it. So that would work as well.
Yeah. So I kind of got in the weeds, which I will admit is fully one of my things. I see something and I'm like, I want to explain it.
Right. No, you're good.
And I go down rabbit holes, but let me step back for a minute and talk about circling back to this whole, there's different ways you can look at it. So you could go through the front. I think we had talked about, you could go through different issues and sort of flip through them and see what they are on the front end. On every poster page, there's also at the bottom a meta box on the edit screen that has a summary. So this is telling us there's 10 errors, 5 contrast errors, 9 warnings. And then if I go to details, then I can see what the specific problems are and get more information about them. So we have some improper use of link, which sometimes just flags. So for example, this one will flag if you're using a link when you should be using a button. It'll also flag if you don't have a link filled in. Right. So an href that goes to a hashtag, which it makes sense on a demo website. If this were actually filled in to go to the right Facebook page, then this wouldn't show up here. So it's a good way for you to find things you forgot to fill in with the right URL. So that's what this is. So that's another way to do it. But,
and I'm guessing that ignore button, like, let's say, for instance, one of these things, like it's flagging it, but it's actually okay. You can hit the ignore button and then it won't suggest that one anymore.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if there, so one that comes up on a lot is ARIA hidden. And ARIA hidden is, we have a whole article in the admin bar that you can go read about it, but basically it's a way, like we were talking about potentially adding it to one of those icons in the heading, because it will tell a screen reader, don't read this out. So here's an SVG, and it's probably on the mobile menu. If I'm not sure where something is, I can hit, we'll just do this one, view on page. It's going to tell me right now it can't find it, and that's because I'm pretty sure that's the mobile menu. But if I go smaller, there it is. So this is something where it is sometimes correct. And we, in Accessibility Checker, we have errors and we have warnings. So you notice this is a warning. The difference is an error is something that the code, it is definitively wrong. And we know that this is a problem. Like that Facebook link to a hashtag that is definitively broken. Like you don't want a Facebook icon that doesn't do anything. Right. But this is a warning, is something that requires a human to assess it. So what I would do is I would inspect this and I would look at that icon. And what I can see, let's see, where is actually, it's here, I think. Yeah, this is our mobile toggle. And inside there is there's a button. And we can sort of can I get to that SVG?
Yeah, I think that span.
There we go. Yep, so there's the SVG, but it's inside a button. And what I want to know is it correct that the bars to open it are hidden? Is there something else that communicates to a screen reader user what that button does. So right now, I'm not actually seeing a label,
So up
but
above
I'm
about
seeing
three,
screen reader text.
yeah, about
So there's,
3 levels above that on the nav class main navigation, there's an ARIA label for mobile toggle.
yeah, that I think is a little bit odd. I would want to listen to this on a screen reader, which we could do, but this is something, but I don't know if we necessarily need to unless you're interested. But normally you wouldn't have a nav just for you wouldn't have a nav just around the button. Like that's a little bit weird. Like you notice there's no actual navigation inside the snap tag. Like that is actually incorrect.
Gotcha.
This is the navigation. And this has, right, like if you go down, this is where we're going to find the item. I think. There we go. Yeah, in the primary menu.
There.
Yeah. So I actually think that's probably something that GeneratePress is doing that's not great. But what I most care about is the button right here, because that's where the SVG is that sighted people see, and it's hidden. And then, but so I'd either want to see an ARIA label or screen reader text. So someone would hear button menu, and then they have, which is good, ARIA expanded false. So they would hear button collapsed menu, button expanded menu. So in that instance, I know this ARIA hidden equals true. This is correct. They don't need to hear about the image because they have the screen reader text right here. So if I make it bigger, we go back. So then on the free plugin, you can ignore things right here on this page. And you could, say like screen reader present and ignore that, but it would only do it on this page, which is not super ideal for something that shows up everywhere.
Right.
It can create a lot of noise. So let me turn off full screen mode because I hate it. All right. So if we go back to accessibility checker and we go to open issues, this is a view that exists in the Pro plugin, and it gives you a count of things throughout the whole site. We're going to actually skip that for a second and jump over to FastTrack. So what this does, it summarizes unique code snippets. So you'll notice on the individual open issues, I have 137 of these. But if I come here, it's actually telling me there's only 39 issues on the whole site because some of them are repeated across pages.
Sure.
So what I would want to do, and we have an open issue, we're going to add the image here. It's not right now, but if we matched one of these, which makes it a little bit tougher right now, but we could view them, but you can add a global ignore.
Okay.
So if I were to add a global ignore to this, that would ignore it for all pages that exist now and in the future. So anytime that comes up again, then you won't see it in your report. And if we edit this page, then we should see that we have one ignored item and there's less.
This just goes to show you how important it is to get things right in your header and your footer and all the things that appear across so many multiples of pages, because you're just going to, whatever issues you have there are going to show up everywhere,
And actually, so that's what I was going to take you to, which is one of the things that I would recommend doing is I would add a new page and I would publish it with no content or draft. It can be a draft, and accessibility checker will save it too. If you're on a staging server, you might as well publish it, but either way, because what this does is it gives us a page where we've scanned only the header and the footer. And this is the page that I would fix things first. So then you can go back and you can assess all of the items, and you can start to figure out, what needs to be fixed in the header and footer. And then when you're going into an individual page or post, you're only getting the content.
Right. Yeah, that makes total sense.
And you can do the same thing. Like if you have a different page template on your blog post where you have a sidebar that maybe doesn't show up on this page, you could go do that on a blank, like a draft blog post with no content in it. And then it'll get the sidebar.
Gotcha. So as people are trying to explore their way through this, obviously there's a lot of terms in here everybody might not be familiar with, right? There's a lot of new concepts to learn if you're new to accessibility. So I
Mhm.
see you have a little info bubble next to a lot of these. Is that going to help explain to them what some of these issues are?
Yep. So there's two ways to find out. The info icon takes you over to our website, and we have really detailed documentation. So I clicked on the ARIA hidden one. There's explanation of what it is, what the warning means. We always say, like, how do we test for it? So it's sort of like a plain language explanation of our algorithm, essentially. So it's different for each one, what the impact on accessibility is and how you would resolve it.
Mm.
And we have examples, we have code snippets where those are. And, this is one where we're saying, you have to assess it like we were talking about.
Right.
So there's some questions to ask yourself.
Yeah, that's super helpful, because I think that is one thing where I know I've got frustrated, and I know other people have too. Is like, not all these questions, not all these issues are black and white. Like, there is so much gray area when it comes to accessibility stuff. Like, ARIA hidden might be right or it might be wrong, and there's a bunch of different reasons why that might be. So you do have to use some, like, questions and answers and reasoning and a little bit of research to figure out if that's actually an issue or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think too. So the other place that we show more shortened, in the Pro plugin, if you go to the individual open issues and you go to anything, so we could go to like missing form label, right here. We also have about, and we have sort of a shorter thing here. And this is also visible in the free plugin and the Pro plugin. When you go through the front end, you may have noticed there's a blurb, a
Yeah.
paragraph that sort of said what this is and how to fix it in a short form. So we are trying to put more instructions in the plugin and provide more testing. This is one. So like this is an input. So if we're going back, we see these all the time. So receive our latest articles in your inbox, and this field doesn't have a label. So we
There's a
could
great
edit.
accessibility weekly article on this as well.
Uh-huh. So it's using fluent forms. So this is a thing, of course, in WordPress, not every problem that exists on the page is actually created on this page. So now I'd have to go. So I'm like, okay, I found it. It's created with Fluent Forms. I'd have to go over to Fluent Forms and find the subscription form. I've never used Fluent Forms before, so it's always fun. And you can actually
You're
see
right
this.
on
This
it.
is an easy fix.
Yeah.
Element label. Email.
It's an easy fix for accessibility, but then it's going to make my design eye go a little crazy when there's a label on top
Yeah,
of it.
should we
And
put it on
everything's
there
off
and go look at
balance.
it? So you have to decide then how you want to handle that from a design standpoint. You should generally always, and I think we have an accessibility weekly about this, you should have a visible label all the time. Because even though you could add this, fill this in, and then you could hide it visually, and that would fix it for screen reader users. But for other people, there might be other people who have issues. So sometimes there's like the floating text where you use CSS positioning and you position the label, like you get rid of this placeholder text. We don't really need that. And we place the label in the field until you click on it, and then it floats up. That's one way to resolve that. Or maybe it just needs to go in line.
Right.
Like have your email address here. And really, this is not your email address for a placeholder is not correct use of placeholder. It should be
an example.
Yeah, like Amber at Equalize Digital.
Right.
Or something like that. So yeah.
The front end checker, like what we see here with the little bubble in the corner, that's fairly new to your plugin as well, isn't it?
Yeah, so we released the first version of this in June or July. It was actually funded by NASA. So they're using our plugin on the NASA website. And this was something that we rolled out to make it easier for people who are not as HTML savvy, because it's hard on that backend review. It's a lot of here's the code.
So you're saying even NASA engineers have trouble with accessibility? Because if that's what I'm hearing, I feel a little bit better.
Yeah, they also have a lot of, like, you imagine content creators. There are a lot of content creators on that website,
Right.
many, many, many. So on millions of pages. So you'll notice we fixed that and we came here, but it's still showing the issue. So on the front end, so you do need to, when you're pushing fixes with the plugin and they're not actually fixed on the page where you did it, you would either, or where it exists, you fix them somewhere else in the sidebar, or in this instance in the form, you either need to rescan the page by hitting update on it, or you can, in the Pro plugin, run another full site scan.
Gotcha.
So that's something to note, especially like if you're doing things in your code and you push a code update, the plugin, you can in Pro like schedule scans that run every week or every month, but it's not going to know that you changed it's not monitoring for every code change on the server. So you would have to, like, the fast way in this instance, since it's just on the one page, is hitting update. And even though nothing on this page does, that's what triggers it to scan. And then if we were to go back, we would no longer see that error.
And so as far as like a workflow for going through this, let's say we've decided our client picked out this site template and we need to make it more accessible. Do you recommend doing basically what you're doing now? You talked about earlier, that, which I thought was a great tip, like doing a blank page just so we can focus on the header and footer, things that are on every page. And it's just systematically going through these things one by one and figuring out what needs to be fixed and how to do it. Is that essentially the workflow you would imagine people should use?
Yeah, that's what we would do. So I do a blank page first, do the header and footer, and then go through what exists in the page template that came with that theme. And the other thing too is sometimes when you're putting content in, then you can fix things along the way as well. So like we mentioned color contrast, like I don't know if you necessarily need to worry about that, because theoretically you're going to go through and you're going to customize the colors for your client's branding. And we'll have made color contrast decisions before you even start with the template. But yeah, I would just go through each page and do that. And then the other big thing would be just hitting the tab key on the front of the website. So if I'm up here at the top, and making sure that I can get to everything and that everything functions the way I expect it to. You know, like if I couldn't for some reason get into this email field, that would be a problem. So
right.
That tends to be more of a problem on like carousels, things like that. You might even ask yourself too, like sometimes I ask myself like about noise and stuff, like the categories here are kind of interesting visually, but I always wonder, like, do we really, how many people would actually click that link, right? To go see all the posts about food and drink.
I don't want to read this article, but I want to read all the other ones like it.
Yeah, exactly. And so sometimes I would try to think about, like, is there a way that we could simplify this, that it makes more sense, or that it is more useful? Because sometimes, you know, the templates, they have, it might look nice from an aesthetic standpoint, but it's not always, I don't know, it's not always the best from a usability standpoint. The thing I will give this template though, if we went back and we look at the summary on this homepage, for example, that I thought was really good, is that there's no headings out of order. And a lot of themes, that is one of the #1 problems that I see. The headings are totally out of order. So shout out to GeneratePress for actually making the H2s, and things like that.
I think we shared some screenshots recently in the group. I think it was Stripe's website where like everything is an H1 on the entire page. It's like, oh, I think it ended up, I went and looked at it, was like every item in their menu was an H1. And I'm like, oh man, that's interesting choice.
Yeah, there's actually, you can do this sometimes just by looking at the document overview and going to the outline.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, this feature in WordPress, it only recognizes core WordPress blocks. So you notice in GeneratePress, it doesn't work, which
Right.
is super annoying. I think this is getting remediated with a WordPress update because they're working on the table of contents block.
Mm-hmm.
And that got flagged because the table of contents block was doing the same thing that the outline was doing. And we're like, yeah, but not everyone uses core heading blocks. So
Right.
yeah. So I think that should get fixed. But
so when we talk about using the plugin and kind of workflow too, do you suspect most of the people using your plugin are installing it on a website, doing an audit, remediating everything, and then uninstalling it? Or is this something you see more as something you install on every website and leave there so it can flag problems into the future?
yeah, so the idea behind the plugin is that you install it and leave it there. So what you do have some initial ramp up time, especially if it's an existing website, to clear out, some of the things in the header or the footer, like we talked about. But then the idea being, just like you teach your clients to fill in Rank Math or Yoast or whatever SEO plugin you're using as they're creating blog posts, hey, go check this. For those of us that have clients that do that, you want to also train them to look for things and check, did they forget alternative text, those sorts of things, and fill those in. But like I was saying, we use it with part of our, we've grown recurring revenue by creating the audit and remediation plans. And basically what we do is we have a set number of hours and it stays on the site. And then every month we'll go and fix a certain number of things based upon what, how big their plan is. And this is especially helpful because we have some clients where they are doing some of their own content editing and they don't always pay super great attention. Or if we have some where they're coming and they know that they had to get fixed because they are either under mandated remediation with the Office of Civil Rights because they're a higher education institution, or they've been sued for accessibility in the United States. And so then this is a way to, I think, to help protect against that or to have a better response if you can show over time. So we have right now, in the Pro plugin, you can get a snapshot, and this updates, I think it does a check every 24 hours and updates your issues. And then in the next week or so, we're going to have an add-on that's just included with the small business and agency plan. So it won't cost anything extra at those tiers, but it'll be a separate add-on you can install that actually logs a history of this. So that you can see over time. And that's a big thing that we've found for people that are concerned about the legal side of things, is that being able to show either progress. So we went from this to that, or we have been making improvements, or we're monitoring it every week and it's not getting worse, those sorts of things. It's really useful to have the history.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I had a few other questions, maybe unrelated to the plugin, but obviously related to accessibility. Before we go there, was there anything else inside the plugin you wanted to make sure we knew was there, or how to use, or do you think we covered pretty much all of it?
The only other thing that I would mention in the Pro plugin that we didn't talk about was there's the ignore log. And so this is sort of the same thing as far as governance comes. So sometimes if you have a website that has multiple people on it, let's say your clients are adding blog posts and you've said, hey, don't publish your blog post if there's accessibility problems, but you can ignore them if they're false positive. We've seen where content creators just like hit ignore on everything.
Sure.
So that it's all 100% and then they publish their post.
That's an easy way to be accessible, right?
Yeah, just hit ignore on all of it. So this is sort of helpful because you can see like, this is a global ignore, but you can see like when things were ignored and by who. And I think that that's sort of a good like governance feature where you can check in and sort of see, hey, was this actually supposed to be ignored? I know on like NASA, for example, they're using this to decide, does Amber need more training in accessibility? right? Like it will tell you who's maybe not doing things the way they're supposed to. So
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I like being able to track who's doing that too, because I can definitely see my clients just hitting ignore and thinking that made the problem go away because now it's not nagging them anymore, you know?
yep. Hmm.
So if you don't mind, do you want to unshare your screen here for a second? And I wanted to
Yeah.
ask you a couple of questions related to this. So I know you brought up the recurring revenue aspect, and that makes everybody in the admin bar excited when we start talking about recurring revenue. I think
Hmm.
there's I think one of the challenge people have is like how to bring this up to clients that are just completely unaware that this is even an issue, right? So there are, some education. Maybe if you're doing a brand new proposal for a brand new website, there's a good place to introduce this conversation. But it's a lot harder when you go back to a client. I've been doing their care plan for 3 years, and now all of a sudden I'm going to bring up some issues. So I'm wondering if you have any like pointers on how we can have these conversations with our clients.
Yeah. I think honesty is really important, and I think it's okay, at least in my experience, it's been okay to say, "Hey, I didn't know this when I first built your
Mm.
website." Or this has become more important since I first built your website. If you don't feel comfortable saying I didn't know this.
Sure.
um, and that is true. Like that's not lying. I think sometimes there are things in the news that might flag it. The Justice Department has been doing a lot more in the last year, and so sometimes it's helpful to pull up, like, hey, this is a new statement that went out on the ada.gov website, and send that out to your clients to be like, when we built your website 3 or 4 years ago, accessibility did exist, but it wasn't really as required for all small businesses. But we've been seeing an increase in legislation, and there's a lot more laws that are requiring it. And so that kind of thing can be a trigger that might get them interested, that doesn't just make it sound like you didn't do your job 4 years ago. There is also a annual report, which I'll send you the link afterwards if you want to share it, that sort of summarizes the lawsuits
Mm.
in the United States and what industries they're in. And so sometimes, like every time that comes out, we'll frequently mention it or share it with clients, especially if they're in, like restaurants or e-commerce, or one of the ones where, or in a state. So like last year, I remember they were saying, boy, there's been a big increase in Florida. So it's like, okay, well, if you're in Florida, this is something you should be aware of. And I think that's one way when we think about us creating this impression of ourselves as, we're not just doers, right? We didn't just like make the thing. Like we're experts that are providing them like ongoing consultation and strategy. And I think that's the way you can sort of frame accessibility in that way, which is that, I'm here looking out for you and your website, and this is the thing that's taking more prominence. And so I wanted to make you aware of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think by evidence, if you're still watching this video right now, you're obviously investing into your education on this topic, which is a huge benefit to your clients. Your clients aren't watching this. Your clients aren't
Yep.
keeping up with all these things. They're not testing out plugins to help them or reading articles to learn how to remediate these issues. So that's actually a very valuable thing you're providing to your clients, but you have to, you have to help them see that value and understand that too, which can be a challenge, but definitely worth it. Um, so I think the other part where I wanted to ask, because so many people seem to get frustrated with this, is we talked about it a little bit, but there's no black and white answers. It seems like everything's kind of this gray area where, in some cases this might be true, or some cases that might be true. And I think a lot of people get to that and get frustrated and say, okay, well, I'm just not even going to fool with it. Like, I can't understand this. It's never clear to me, so I'm just not going to mess with it. So
Mm-hmm.
the example, I know I've picked this up from somewhere, but the example I like to give people that clicked for me was kind of like SEO. You know that your website's never fully SEO'd, right? You can always do more to make the SEO better of your website. And I think that's a great way to look at accessibility too, is it's a journey. You're on a path, you're somewhere along a spectrum at how accessible your website is. So I'd love for you to speak on that a little bit, because I know you have a lot of knowledge in this field that I don't have. So I think it'd be really great for people to hear that, just have a little bit of encouragement on this journey.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of small things that developers can do when they're creating sites or just build into their practice as they're adding content, that even if something isn't perfect, it can make a really big difference. So for example, links being meaningful is something that really can impact a screen reader user's ability to get around a website. And they don't want to hear things like learn more, because learn more about what? What does link learn more mean, right?
Right.
So if you just either add, and there are some page builders now which are adding the ability, or there's a plugin called screen reader text format that allows you to add screen reader text into any block. So it would work with a lot of the block editor tools that don't have this built in, but being able to add ARIA labels, like we did see that GeneratePress has the ability to do some of that. So starting to think a little bit more about like just adding meaning to links is one way that you can make a big difference. And I think there's a lot of other examples like that that are small tweaks that you just make. Like we talked about headings. And if everybody just started actually using headings in a meaningful order, instead of being like, it's small, it's an H5. It's really big, it's an H1.
Right.
Right? Like that really helps people and Google understand what your content is about and how it relates. And so there's a lot of little things that you can do over time. And I think, it's never a make it accessible overnight. I think it really is progress. That's what I was talking about a little bit with us building the audit history add-on that will sort of log things over time, because that is a big thing that we've seen in some of the lawsuits where we've been brought in to remediate, is just that they want to see good faith effort.
Yeah.
And I think that for a developer, I know it can seem overwhelming or scary. And it feels like, oh, I don't even want to talk to my client about that because I don't know it, and I'm afraid I'm going to get in legal trouble. But if you think about it, like privacy laws are much the same way. And I am not an attorney, but what I say to my clients is there are laws in the United States and in Europe and other places around the world about privacy. You have to have a privacy policy. I cannot tell you what is in your privacy policy. You have to have one. Here are some choices about how you can get one. You choose the path that works for you. And if we, and maybe we need to bring in someone to consult on this particular thing. So I think that's the other thing too on accessibility. Similarly, you don't have to say that you're an accessibility expert. What I think is important is saying to them that that accessibility is important. Here are some reasons why it's important. And it doesn't just have to be fear. It can also be that it will help with your SEO, and it helps with conversion rate and those sorts of things. You want more people to be able to submit the form or buy the product on the website. But let's talk about what resources are for making the website more accessible. So we partner with other agencies. There's also other people out there, some of whom are in the admin bar, that do work for other agencies. I know Colleen does a lot with PDFs, and we don't do anything with PDFs. And we're frequently like, your PDFs have to be accessible. Meet Colleen, right? And I think that's okay. Just building that toolbox will help you. And what I think is most important, going back to that good faith effort, is that you did communicate about it. Because I think what I have seen is clients get the most angry about accessibility problems on their website when one of two things happen. Number one is a developer promised them an accessible website, and then it's not. That's bad. Don't lie. And then the other thing is just when it comes out of the blue and it's a shock, right? And they're like, my developer never told me about this thing, and they built me this site, and I thought it was great, and they never even told me this was a thing, and now I got a demand letter. Like, that's really frustrating for clients. So I think you don't have to say that you're the expert at everything, but our job to our clients is just to make them aware that there are things and to connect them with resources that can help them if we're not the right person for those resources.
Absolutely. And I found, so many of these things are just like the fundamental things. Like if you'll just start, I think that's the reason we started the Accessibility Weekly articles, right? Because it's an overwhelming topic, and you're not going to you know, this afternoon I'm going to learn website accessibility, and that's going to be the end of this forever. The idea was to break it down into some small pieces, and if every week you could learn one new thing about accessibility and implement that into all your builds going forward, the idea was over a year's period you're going to have a lot more knowledge. And I think that's where I've seen the biggest strides for myself. Obviously I'm early on in that journey, but the biggest strides I've seen for myself are like the things that I'm now putting inside my starter site, or like I'm
Mhm.
not going to just import my clients' colors that they give me. I'm going to put them into like one of those color matrices and see how can I use all these colors. And it's just like all these things that add up that just save you so much time, because it's easier to do all this stuff right in the first place than it is to use your plugin, find out all the issues, and then go remediate them. That's the long way around to do this. So if you could avoid that in the beginning, that's probably the better way to go.
Yeah, and I mean, so that's what, when you talk about putting it in your starter site, that's another way I would say for anyone who's building websites, you can use even just the free version of ours. They are saying do the header and footer, but do all of that in your starter site. And if you have the Pro plugin, and you can add global ignores. So if you always use Generate Press, we've just checked for you and said it's fine for those nav menu icons to be are hidden. You can have that as a global ignore in your starter site that you
Oh,
then copy, and then you'll never have to enter that global ignore ever again.
nice. Even better.
So, right. So like thinking about that too, just spend a little bit of time addressing your starter from an accessibility standpoint, making whatever tweaks you need to make to your starter. And then if you start building websites off that, like we spent a bunch of time because we have a custom starter, but our initial nav menu wasn't super great. So it was an investment to not do it quote for a client.
Right.
But once we rolled it out in our starter, it's like, well, we never have to build a nav menu ever again.
Yeah. Now it's for
Right?
every
Like,
client. Yeah.
yeah.
Totally
So
worth it.
so I think like that's a good thing too to think about, is like how can you shift it earlier in your process, and that will save you more time.
Absolutely. Well, awesome. Well, Amber, this has been a long time coming. Hopefully not the last time we do something like this. I'm sure there's plenty more opportunities for us to dive in deeper in all this, but I definitely appreciate you taking the time to walk us through here and look at all this. I'll make sure there's links to everything we talked about down in the description of wherever you're watching this. If anybody wants to talk with you, reach out with you, ask any questions, I know you can always be found in the admin bar, but what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Yeah, so our website is equalizedigital.com. Besides the admin bar, I'm most frequently on Twitter. I'm
Mhm.
still calling it Twitter.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
And that's the other way to get a hold of me outside of the admin bar and my website. And of course, WordPress Accessibility Meetup, I always recommend coming there. It's a great place to come learn. Everything's on Zoom twice a month.
Absolutely. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Amber. And we will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.